That's what I tell myself, too, when I find out I'm 5'9". I'm the same height as Napoleon. There you go.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to another edition of Popcorn Bucket List, the show that asks the question, is it possible to win a land war in Russia? No, the answer is no. The answer is no. Yeah, that's kind of going to be the topic here today. Not necessarily a land war with Russia, but Napoleon, as that is the latest biopic here. Joining us today to talk about biopics and specifically this movie, good friend of mine from high school, maybe even a bigger history nerd than I am, Wes Beeren here and joining us on the show here today.
Hi.
Hello. Yeah, thank you for not coming in with like a huge laundry list of things to do for an entrance.
Oh, no. I have no idea what to say.
Yeah, no, we're just making this up as we go along here. But yeah, that is the topic of discussion here today, our opening spotlight, biopics. What makes a good or a bad one here? I feel like I've alluded to this. I've alluded to my thoughts personally about it. We're going to go a little bit more deeper dive into it here today. First things first, do we want to kind of look at the definition of a biopic?
I would say, yeah, we should definitely give some parameters or some outlines to...
Okay, so from a movie standpoint, so this was from like a movie website. The definition of a biopic is a movie that dramatizes the life of a real, non-fictional individual, often covering significant events in their history. Now, I found that interesting, the word dramatize. I don't know if I'm saying that exactly right, but
dramatize.
Dramatize.
There
we go.
Like
That's
right
as I was saying, I was like, I think that's right, but I don't think it is.
I'm literally just here for grammatical help. That's all I'm here for.
Don't say that, because then we're going to have you here every week, because we screw up stuff so many times. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It feels like that word right there almost gives it an out to what my biggest problem is with biopics. That kind of makes it almost so that you can kind of fictionalize a few things, and that's my biggest problem here. Mm-hmm. I was trying to look up. I thought dictionary definition had like a different Webster or Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition of biopic was a little bit different, and by a little bit different, I mean it's only 3 words: a biographical movie.
Oh,
so I don't know which route are we taking here.
That's very
those are
3
words,
different.
but it also is almost more complicated, or not necessarily more complicated. Like leaves it way more to interpretation,
more broad.
Yeah. So that's the official Merriam-Webster definition. The other one I think I got from like a Studio Binder or something like that. But
okay.
I don't know. What do we think of? I've kind of given my thoughts. What do we think of the other kind of definitions here? Which one do we kind of like better?
It's tricky because you can have a good movie about somebody, but that is very factually inaccurate. But the movie was really good and enjoyable from a entertaining standpoint, not from a historical accuracy point of view. So I don't know. I would say also it kind of depends on maybe the person or group that you're doing, because I might want something more entertaining than maybe this person. Yeah, he's important, but he's very boring. Very boring. So, yeah, spice it up. I don't know.
Would you argue maybe Darkest Hour almost falls under that? Because, what Winston Churchill did was important, but, him doing it is not as entertaining to watch.
Yeah.
I get the decisions he made during World War II and shown in that movie were very important, world-changing moments. It's only so entertaining watching a guy go into a room and call Roosevelt from the telephone and not even see the other end of that call.
Yeah.
But is Darkest Hour, now it's been a little bit since I've seen it, but is it a biopic movie, or is it just more of a historical a history movie?
It was, from my recollection, it was that historical moment from the view of Churchill.
Okay.
From what I remember of it, at least. And I think... Okay, so I think this is also where sometimes the conflicts of biographical movie comes into play, too. Because, let's just put it out there, we just literally came from the theater to watch Napoleon. You saw it a couple a couple days ago. That's kind of the catalyst for this conversation here. That one truly looked at the term biographical and was like, we're going to cover this guy's life from point A to point B, and not
in a very good way either. I just want to point that out right away.
Yeah, okay.
They did not
let's
cover
take a pause
it very
here.
well.
Let's talk about Napoleon, because that is you've been I've been holding you at the gates long enough, both of you. Who wants to go first?
You guys just saw it more recently, so you guys can talk about first.
Okay,
and
okay. There are more intimate scenes in this than 50 Shades of Grey.
And
this movie should have been called 50 Shades of Josephine.
They're not good intimate scenes either.
No, they're not.
No. Like, what was the direction? I mentioned this to Nick. What was the direction in those scenes from Ridley Scott? What was he saying? Was, all right, Joaquin, let's see more underbite from you now.
Yeah.
That's really going to display how into this you are, is all that underbite you're giving.
Sorry.
No, I don't know. I
was going to say, like, for my, like, overall of the entire film, I thought the battle sequences were cool. Most of them I thought. But I don't think they did a good job of... He was supposed to be a great military genius.
Yeah.
And they kind of showed it a little bit, like, once or twice. But that was really about it. I wanted more out of that aspect of it. But I also know that there's, like, a 4+ hour cut. And that's where I'm cute. Like, I wanted to watch this film in the theater to see the big battle sequences on a big screen.
Yeah.
Now, when I go back and watch the 4-hour cut, I'm hoping a lot of that other stuff that was just kind of there, I hope that's like, oh, that 2-minute scene was actually part of a 15-minute scene that made way more sense when everything else was around it.
I'm really glad you brought up the 4-hour cut and that aspect of it, because I would actually argue, if and when this 4-hour cut does get released, I don't think you're going to get all the answers you want out of that. No? Because if you think about it, how much budget goes into these big battle scenes, I have a feeling a lot of what was cut was more of the Napoleon Josephine stuff, because that was where the pacing was so off, in my opinion, where it was just like scene after scene after scene after scene, like
hard
30
cuts.
seconds.
Yeah. But that's kind of what I mean. I'm fine with more if they flush it out and make it better. Like that 30-second scene.
But I'm talking about of Josephine and Napoleon. You wanted to see more of the military genius. I highly doubt his military genius is being shown off in the bedroom as
That's
much
true.
more.
That's true. But I will say the battle sequences, I got what I wanted to get out of them from the movie theater. Even if they add a little more, I'm going to be watching it at home on my TV or projector. Yeah. Even if it is a little bit longer, that'll be great. But more of the, maybe even like the necessary like battle tactics in the tent, talking with the little guy.
I don't think you're going to get that in this 4-hour cut. Because like, why would you cut that? If clearly he was preferring more of the Josephine Napoleon stuff here.
Yep.
And was cutting all this, like all of that. And it was like, well, we can't cut the battle sequences because we spent how much money on all these extras and everything like that.
People are going to want to see that.
Yeah.
People are going to watch those sequences. But yeah, I'm hoping they can go more in depth and like make it less weird, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I don't think that's that's me calling my shot there.
I'm
going to let you watch that 4-hour cut though, because I don't want to sit down and watch that for 4 hours.
They did a poor job at portraying Napoleon as like he was historically depicted, as he has been cataloged by his peers and by himself and by the people who were around at that time. Like, you were talking about the military genius that was not displayed, something that actually really upset me, especially in the first couple of battle sequences, was how like impetuous they showed Napoleon. They were like, he's running into the battle and he's all worked up and he doesn't know what's going on and all this.
He looked flustered during most of it.
Yeah.
And that was never Napoleon. Napoleon's biggest strength was that he could sit there. He would almost always be, he'd be there in the battle, but he would be in the back watching it and be able to say, okay, we got guys moving in here. We need to move our guys here. He knew what he was doing.
Yep.
And to show that, like, he almost got beaten up by a bunch of French politicians
Yeah,
in one scene.
yeah.
That there's no way that ever would have happened in real life, and it takes away because you're like, oh, this is supposed to be this big important guy, this guy who fundamentally shaped like decades of European politics and countries, and then all of a sudden he's just kind of this whiny baby.
Yeah, he's kind of a bumbling moron.
Yeah, and he just
What was the one scene towards the end where they were like, when they were about to invade Russia, and it's like, well, or no, they had like just gotten to Moscow. Moscow's on fire and all that, and he's like, well, we got to follow him. He's like, well, it's almost winter. Like, we got to stop. And he literally just starts like throwing a tantrum in his hat. I'm like, this was the leader that understand, eventually at one point in history, like he was exiled and then he comes back and pretty much the military that's sent to rearrest him turns in support of him. I look at that and I'm like, if I'm a soldier, I'm not following that guy.
Yeah.
He's a grown man literally like yelling.
Yeah.
That is not an exaggeration, people. That is the scene.
It's bad.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like, and that's my point of sorry, I don't mean to cut you off there.
No.
What were you going to say?
I was just going to say that that scene where like all of the guys are sent there to arrest him and all of his soldiers are sent there to arrest him. That scene was done way better in the movie Waterloo. I don't know if either of you guys have seen that scene. I can't remember who plays Napoleon. It's an old, if I'm not mistaken, it's an old Soviet film.
Okay.
It was made during the Soviet Union, and super historical accurate to the Battle of Waterloo especially. But there is that scene where he comes back from Elba, and it's almost shot for shot the same thing, but it's done way better because you feel the connection that Napoleon has with his troops compared to Joaquin Phoenix's, and then just some couple guys start shouting out, "Hey, you're the emperor," and it's like, oh yeah, that. Sure, I would violate my orders to follow this guy.
Yeah.
The movie you're talking about, 1970 Waterloo, Rod Steiger, Napoleon Bonaparte, also starred Christopher Plummer and Orson Welles.
Huh.
So there's a few fun
Was I right? Was it a Soviet film, or am I completely...
I don't know if it says here on IMDb.
Yeah, I don't know. I just know that I used to see that on not AMC.
TMT?
Nope.
Let's just start putting all the...
Turner Classic Movies?
TCM.
Let me guess, you were watching it at 5 years old? Way sooner than you probably should have been?
No, but...
that's a running joke for him, is he always watches movies way too soon.
Yeah.
Well, from what I remember, there weren't any of those intimate scenes in Waterloo.
Yeah.
Okay, so also this, not to go back to that, but I mean, only because the movie focuses us so much on it, and I get it. That was definitely part of Napoleon's history and his story and all that. I'm starting to wonder if Ridley Scott just doesn't know how to shoot those scenes, because I was looking into it. One of the only times I felt like truly uncomfortable watching an intimate scene in a movie theater was during House of Gucci. Also directed by Ridley Scott.
Was that really?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I can attest to this. A friend of mine out there, if he's watching this, he could attest to this. We watched that movie, and he saw my reaction change from just kind of me like watching it to just kind of like. That was my live reaction in the same theater we were in, by the way, Theater 2. It's all connected, man. I'm telling you.
Well, maybe the idea there is then just simply the fact that maybe Ridley Scott doesn't know how
to do that.
Yeah, maybe that's. I was going to go into more detail, but I wasn't sure exactly where the level of maturity in the audience level is here. But maybe Ridley Scott's a virgin. Maybe that's the takeaway from this.
To answer your question as far as the maturity of the audience, that will probably go on the YouTube cut, but we're going to cut that for the public access channel here later on. Okay, I do feel like we're getting a little off track here. That's mainly my fault. Anyways, what was the point? Okay, so I guess my question here is, and we're going to solve this right here, right now. Biographical films. I've said this many times before. If there's going to be a movie about a real life character, I'd much rather watch the documentary, because I feel like you can drag out some of those moments and actually explain it a little bit better. Mm-hmm. Like, again, I know that whole stuff with Josephine, with Napoleon, that all, for the most part, happened. the struggles to have an heir and all that sort of stuff. I don't see how in the 4-hour cut you justify dragging it out as much as you did, especially considering how from a narrative film perspective, you kind of have to pick one general conflict and follow it.
Yeah. You can have like the A plot but the B plot's pretty small.
But here it's like they're two competing A plots.
Yeah.
Like the movie wants to show off more of the battle sequences, but it keeps getting like fought back by this other plot line right now.
Yeah. And it really just didn't seem like the movie knew what it wanted from itself. Like, but not to talk about, just Napoleon, but all biopics in general. I really think that's why you were saying the documentaries. I think that's why, what are they called? The mockumentaries. The ones where you get actors to actually do the stuff that actually happened and you try to follow it as historically possible.
Yep.
Band of Brothers obviously comes to mind as the greatest example of a mockumentary done properly, done with historical intent, and being incredibly entertaining while doing so. I don't know if you have to watch a documentary when you have something like that as an option for you, something that you can still be entertained by.
Yeah.
I just feel like if you're going to say it's a biographical film, and that's essentially one of the only things that shares in both the definitions we talked about here, it's a biopic, is a movie about a real life person. Mm-hmm. I feel like you have a responsibility to keep it as accurate as possible. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe you kind of alluded to this earlier, but another example I want to bring up, and I feel like we brought it up on this show before, is Bohemian Rhapsody. When I left that movie after watching it, I was really entertained. It was one of my favorite movies of the year at that point. And then you spend more than a minute researching it, and you're like, okay, like maybe 20% of this was factual.
Yeah.
Maybe. Why should I, as a viewer, have to do homework afterwards? Mm-hmm. Because if you're going to make a movie about a person or event or a group of people and do kind of your own thing, the audience members should not be expected to do homework afterwards. They're just going to assume everything in there was factual.
Yeah.
And then you're misleading people. And especially with Bohemian Rhapsody, you were talking towards the end of that movie, it was talking about, Freddie Mercury at the end of his life and obviously the things that affected him, but they had the timeline completely off.
Yeah.
You're talking about the thing that killed a man, that affected his life in almost some negative ways potentially here. And you're just going to rewrite it the way you want it to?
Yeah.
I don't see how you as a filmmaker can have responsibility for that. And we haven't had as much time to look into Napoleon as far as the historical inaccuracies. We think there's a few probably.
There's a fair amount. The one, the timeline one that really bothered me, just really, really jumped out at me right away, was in the movie, Napoleon and Josephine get their divorce, and then Napoleon meets with Tsar Alexander. That's not how it happened in real life. Napoleon met Tsar Alexander, and they became really, really good. Also, missed set opportunity. The first time that Napoleon and Tsar Alexander met, if I'm remembering correctly, was on like a barge in the middle of a river. And, like this really fancy barge that they had decked out and everything. In the movie, they just met in some basic tent. I was like, that's a missed opportunity. That's really cool, Yeah. But anyway, the reason that stuck out to me so much was because in real life, when Napoleon and Tsar Alexander met, they became really close friends. They really, really liked each other. And Napoleon actually went back to France, and there's a record of what he said to Josephine, that he told Josephine that he liked Tsar Alexander so much that if he had been a woman, Napoleon would make Tsar Alexander his mistress. He told his wife that there's this guy that he liked so much that he was going to make his mistress.
Were an interesting couple, to say the least.
Yeah. So that one really stuck out. The timeline in the Napoleon movie is all over the place. Yeah. All over the place. And that, but to an extent, I can accept that in biopic movies because you do have, with Bohemian Rhapsody or Napoleon or a lot of other movies, you are taking decades of time and trying to condense it down into a 2-hour movie. So you do have to switch some things up. I'm usually okay with that as long as it doesn't affect the overall story of the movie. And in Napoleon's case, I really think it did in some spots. I feel like the overall story of the movie suffered because of what they switched around, yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but and I get your point there, and I realize sometimes you do have to take liberties with the movie, and one or two things, I guess for me, it's almost like, okay, you get a few things you can change here and there, as long as it doesn't affect how people's real lives actually played out. Because again, my biggest problem is, okay, well, then people are going to go out there and think, okay, so this is exactly how Napoleon was or something like that. And they're not going to fact check or double check that, nor should they. I'm not saying it because, like, at a certain point, if you're required to essentially do homework after every biopic you see, after every time you watch a movie that's based on a true story or person, no one's going to see those anymore.
Yeah.
First of all. Second of all, it's just going to make it so that the credibility in any filmmaker's eyes is going to be a little less now. In fact, actually, I keep waiting to bring up this quote. This is actually one of the reasons why I think you're on the show here today, because I sent you this as kind of a joke.
Yeah.
And then you were raving.
I got very upset
raging
about it. I think I know what you're talking about.
Over the text message here. When Ridley Scott was asked about historians having criticisms about Napoleon here, and I'm going to have to censor one of the words here, quote, "When I have issues with historians, I ask, excuse me, mate, were you there? No? Well, shut the bleep up then," end quote. Okay, no. I have a lot of problems with that. So now we're just going to focus here a little bit on Ridley Scott. Okay, if your argument is, were you there, then be quiet. Was Ridley Scott there? No, sir. I think not.
But he's Ridley Scott.
I don't care.
Yeah, that's pretty.
I don't care if he's like reinvented the Alien franchise or whatever, made Blade Runner and all that. That's fine. I just, again, it comes down to, if you're going to rewrite history, you almost have to make sure the audience knows that. Like, I would say Quentin Tarantino. I'm going to talk about Tarantino here for you.
Let's go.
Just to brighten your mood a little bit here, because I know you're big. I know you love your Quentin Tarantino. When I watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it did include a few of real life characters, but the beginning was so much, okay, these are fictional characters based off of real stories, but these were clearly fictional characters.
Yep. Yeah.
That to me is at least an excuse. That is Tarantino saying, this is fully 100% my narrative. I am the god of this timeline. I said what happens here and there. This is not me trying to tell a historical story. This is me saying, I'm just going to kind of play with this world a little bit here, a little bit.
And I think he also does a great job, because going to the end of that film, that's not at all what happened.
It is so cartoonishly out there that you know it's fictional.
Yeah.
Like, you don't even have to have text on screen saying, well, this didn't actually happen or whatever. It was like, oh, this is just Tarantino kind of playing in this world.
Yeah.
This wasn't real life.
Yeah. It's the Tarantino verse.
I remember... It is because because there is actually like connections or like brands you see or whatever that's connecting some of the movies.
Yep.
I remember seeing a quote after that movie came out from a film critic on YouTube I sometimes watch or something like that, and he said, cameras are oftentimes time machines to the past. Tarantino takes it to a whole new level in which he actually goes back into the past and changes a bunch of things, and he meant it in a good way.
Yeah.
But to the first point of that, movies can be educational if you do it historically accurate and everything like that. And that's kind of my problem with a lot of biopics is, if I got to go and do homework and I find like it's a vast majority of it was not right, to me, you failed in the movie. It's a biopic, biographical. If I wrote a biography, like wrote a written book, a biography about you, but like 60% of it was wrong, how would you feel about that?
True.
Even if it painted you like in a better light, if it made you like mayor of Marshall in the 90s and you reinvigorated everything and you built the aquatic center 10 years before it was supposed to, or something like that.
So not to defend Ridley Scott.
I think a counter would be fair.
But I feel like the one thing that you have to take into account is the filmmaker's intent. Was Ridley Scott, like you said, Quentin Tarantino, his intent to make the movies is to make a really cool movie in his own image. Was Ridley Scott's intent to make a biopic movie? Because if his intent was to make a biopic movie, then he failed. If his intent was to make a historically accurate movie about the time period, then he failed. If his intent was to make an interesting movie, in my opinion, he probably also failed at that. But
I'm really waiting for your counterpoint to show up at any time here.
But if you were to take a different movie, I hate to bring it up. Braveheart.
Oh?
I don't think Mel Gibson's intent was to make a historically accurate biopic movie. I think his intent was, hey, I found out about this really cool sounding Scottish guy. I'm going to make a really cool movie with me as a star. So what's the intent behind is really got to be brought into it, I think.
That's a great point, because looking at it that way, if you are Ridley Scott, I think his intent, there's not very many big movies about Napoleon.
No.
Napoleon is a very hard and interesting character to. I remember Stanley Kubrick worked on a Napoleon film for like 10 years and just said, nope, can't do it, not doing it. He read thousands of books about him and read every piece of thing he wrote. Stanley Kubrick read it and just said, you know what, I can't do this. But I think with Ridley Scott, he was, I'm going to make a big epic movie. It's going to have awesome fight scenes. It's going to have to talk about Jocelyn. And I'm just going to kind of, I don't think his intent was to make a accurate it was just I'm going to make a big movie about Napoleon.
I have two counters to each of those things there. First of all, I would argue he was trying to make an epic, in which case he failed. Because why would you even shoot those battle scenes at all if your intention was to focus on the Josephine and Napoleon part of it? In which case, then it's like, well, that's just the epic part takes a back seat to the love triangle. And if you wanted to focus on his personal life love angle, that's fine. But then don't focus the trailer. And I guess that's not necessarily always up to him, whatever. I'm trying to think. So you bring up Braveheart. I'm actually glad you did as well.
Great movie. I love that movie, by the way.
And you love it because it is an epic fight, an epic thing.
Yes.
Nobody went to Braveheart because they were clamoring for William Wallace.
Yeah.
They wanted to see a William. They were just foaming at the mouth waiting for William Wallace movie. They went to it because Mel Gibson at that time was at the height of his powers.
Yep.
They wanted to see a good Mel Gibson movie. You could have named that character anything, and I guarantee you would have made the same amount of box office, probably would have had the same critical appeal, same everything. But instead we had an inaccurate William Wallace picture. I think another example of that is The Greatest Showman. P.T. Barnum is a terrible human being.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Is that how Hugh Jackman portrayed him in that movie?
No.
But the fans were not clamoring for a P.T. Barnum movie. They wanted to see Zac Efron and Hugh Jackman in a musical.
Yep.
If you go back in time and say, just call it The Greatest Showman and say, oh, he's Joel McClane. I'm terrible at coming up with fake names. I'm sorry. On the spot. If you just called it Hugh Jackman is in a theater production, it would have made the same amount of box office. It would have been the same critical appeal. In fact, I would argue probably better critical appeal.
Yep.
So I'll let you I'll let you talk here just a second.
He talks a lot.
I'm sorry. I'm passionate about this. What can I say? If your argument is, hey, I want to do this story about a guy who nearly conquered the world and also had love affairs, whatever, just cast Joaquin Phoenix, cast Vanessa Kirby, do it set in this time period. Don't call it Napoleon, call it whatever you want. And then you don't have to worry about the historians clamoring around you being like, well, this wasn't accurate. It's like, well, you can't say it wasn't accurate. This is my story.
Yeah.
I'm just I'm doing it based off this.
That's a great point, because I personally know another history buff that was As soon as he heard Napoleon was getting a movie and Joaquin Phoenix, he was amped. Went to it opening night, extremely mad. Hated it.
Yeah.
Hated everything about it. He was like, I should make my own Napoleon movie. Like, that's how much it was. And at first I hadn't seen it yet, and I was like, no way can it be that bad. You were so pumped for this.
Yeah.
So he's like, yeah, it's terrible. It's like, now after I saw it, I saw where he was coming from. To your point, he wanted to see a movie about Napoleon
because it's called
Napoleon.
Yes,
Yeah.
That's my point. Is like, if you're gonna call your movie Napoleon, you have to make it about Napoleon, and it is your responsibility, in my opinion, to make it accurate, because that is a real life person.
Yep.
You can't just play God with that whenever.
They never showed anything with his like stomach and all of that, which I didn't like.
Also, wasn't it that he always had like a thing of poison around his neck just in case? And I always thought that was because that's what I think that's what caused the stomach cancer, wasn't it?
I don't know if that was ever like historically.
Was that okay? Maybe that was just a rumor or something like that.
You know, same with the Napoleon super short, like we were talking about.
Yeah.
It wasn't actually
true. I
true.
noticed in the film they tried to make him look short. Whenever he was around people, they were always shooting at the angles.
Yeah,
and it's like,
it was like the anti-Tom Cruise.
Yeah, and it's like,
well, they had that one scene where he was in Egypt, and he was he had to pull the box over to stand up next to the mummy of the pharaoh, and like, you get what they're trying to do. Like, this man is trying to emulate the great pharaohs of the ancient world, the leaders of the world at the time. But all I could think of was Napoleon was average height for his time, and people were a lot shorter before that. So if anything, like, he probably should have been taller than the mummy. But
and it's like,
he was 5'9", which was average height for the time.
Yeah.
But
that's what I tell myself too when I find out I'm 5'9". I'm the same height as Napoleon. There you go.
Yeah.
Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Let's take a break here and talk about the Marshall 6 Theater here in Marshall, Minnesota. As the temperatures continue to go down, that means that you're going to want a place to stay out of the weather and stay warm. What better place than the Marshall 6 Theater here in the month of December? Head on over there, get yourself some warm concessions to warm you up, and then stay out of the weather by staying inside and watching a movie or two while you're there. Speaking of the temperatures going down, that means the holidays are right around the corner here. And if you need to get a gift for that someone in your life who is a big movie fan, no better place than to get a Marshall 6 Theater gift card for anyone on your Christmas list. Head on over to the Marshall 6 Theater to get all that and so much more here in Marshall, Minnesota.
Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
I don't know. I think I've pretty much said everything I want to say here. I guess it just, to me, if you're going to, so like I've always said, if I were to do a historical fiction or a historical feature-length movie, I did a documentary, it's on our channel, I'll link to it, whatever, of the courthouse robbery, the one that happened in Curry. You remember that one?
Yep.
I've done a documentary on that. That's the accurate story and everything. If I were to do like a Western, I would do it based on that story, but I would change all the names. I would make it more action-y because, to be honest, the heist itself was not actually all that action-y if you were to do it real life.
Yeah.
But if I were to make an actual entertaining movie, I would change all the details and make a whole new fictional town and all that. That's how I think if you're going to, what was it, dramatize? What is it? Dramatize. Thank you. We're going to have you on every week just to fix me on that one now.
I'll drive all the way back from Rochester.
We'll figure out a Zoom thing. We'll figure out a Zoom thing. If you're going to take a story and say, this is pretty cool, but we can make it cooler, that's fine, but you have to fictionalize it. I feel like that is the responsibility of filmmakers.
Yeah.
You can't take people's lives and just say, well, I'm going to do whatever I want with it.
And so, not to curb my point of saying you have to look at the filmmaker's intent. I still think that is something you have to take into account, but I think too many filmmakers, too many wealthy people in general, think that the only thing that matters is their intent. I think Ridley Scott, in that quote that you were talking about with the historians, I think that shows that he doesn't really care about how people perceive his movies. He more cares about his intent and what he wants to do with his movie. He doesn't really care how the audience takes it in. And or at least that's what that quote seems to give to me. And I think that's the other, probably more important side, is what does the audience get out of the movie?
Mm-hmm.
Because without the audience, you have no movie. It's same thing with any work of art. The artist can have a certain intent, but the artwork might be perceived as something different.
Mm-hmm.
And with movies, especially historical biopic movies, that can be extraordinarily dangerous too, because you could create something that people could latch onto and create a very bad false narrative about what actually happened in history.
Fake news.
Yeah.
I mean, it actually is. I mean, that's a term that's thrown around here a lot, but I mean, in this case, like
it fits.
fake. And
have you seen Gods and Generals?
Gods and no, I
Oh,
don't
that's
think I have seen
is that a TV show?
No, it was a movie. It was the same guy who did the movie Gettysburg.
Okay.
But instead of like with Gettysburg being a neutral stance where he showed both the Union and the Confederate side, Gods and Generals more specifically portrayed the Confederate stance. And it's been a while, but it showed the death of General Jackson, Stonewall Jackson, and it's been latched onto by neo-Confederates and people saying, see, this shows what the Civil War was actually like. It was a bunch of gentlemanly Southerners seceding from the tyranny of the Union and fighting to preserve their way of life. They're the underdogs, and it wasn't, all these awful things that they were doing. It was really, really good things that they were doing.
Yep.
It just didn't work out for them. That's what Gods and Generals does. And the filmmaker at the time, he was like, yeah, no, it's not propaganda for any side. It's just what actually happened. And it wasn't how things actually happened. He changed a bunch of things. He actually put African American people who were slaves into his movie as compassionate to the Confederate cause. And people have latched onto that, saying, see, this shows what's actually, and I don't see it as much in Napoleon, but there are definitely things that people could latch onto and see, well, Napoleon did this or Napoleon did that, and maybe that was what
if you
he was
cry
trying
into
to
your
do.
hat in Moscow saying, I want to invade Russia, you can get away with it, I guess. Yeah,
Or
I don't see any extremes like that, but it is the principle there.
The one thing I could see with Napoleon is the kind of the toxic masculinity stuff. Like the
Oh yeah, you mentioned this in our car ride over here.
yeah, like there's that one line, he's like, I'm built different than other men.
Oh,
and stuff like that. Like, or there was that one line that Josephine said, like, you're nothing without me or your mother or different, like it's definitely almost like and I actually read a critic's review who thought that that's what Ridley Scott was trying to go after, was kind of a satirical take on the current idea of what like toxic masculinity is. Like the very fact that in their divorce proceeding, he slapped Josephine in the face in front of everybody.
Yeah.
Or like, when one of the intimate scenes, like you were saying, you felt bad for the guards that were sitting there and that had to watch.
Oh yeah, when they under the table.
Yeah.
And it was right after another scene that was just like that. It's like, can you break it up a little bit here or something? I don't know.
So I did see a critic who said that that's what he thought Ridley Scott was going after, was satirical take on
if it
all
is,
that
he didn't go far enough
grossness
with it.
that
If it is, he did not go far enough with it, in my opinion. But
What'd you guys think of Joaquin Phoenix? Because I really like him. I think he's a phenomenal actor. I think he did the best with what he could do from what the script called for, if that makes sense.
I agree.
I think Napoleon could have been written 10 different ways, and I think he could have done whatever way he was written. This was just the way he was written for this film, and I think he did as best he could
I don't like all the people who have said that Joaquin Phoenix was too old for this role. I disagree with that 100%. I think he did a wonderful job with, like you said, with what he was given.
Like that's what he was given to work with.
Yeah.
You're gonna do the best you can.
Yeah. I think Nick wants to disagree.
I don't think he's getting any actor. I don't think he's getting any actor nominations for this.
I don't think so either.
That's really all I got to say about that.
He, like we said at the beginning, he did seem to pull a little bit of his Joker performance.
There is moments of
into the
Joker.
Napoleon.
When he's running away from that group or whatever at the palace or whatever, like you could see Joker in there.
Yeah.
And it's like, I felt like that was just him. I don't know.
That might not be intentional.
I can only speculate as to what happened on set. I don't know how much direction really Scott gave Joaquin Phoenix. But it does kind of feel like he just didn't know, or like you kind of alluded to, which is like he did the best with what he could do. Well, he wasn't really sure what he needed to do in certain moments, so then he just kind of fell back on that because it's like, well, this is where I won the Best Actor for, so let's just kind of do that a little bit here. But
or it might not be intentional because of, like, historically speaking, any actor who plays the Joker is just super messed up afterwards, and maybe that just stuck with him a little bit, you know? I don't know.
I mean, Austin Butler still has that Elvis talking, I guess.
Yeah.
So maybe that's just a Best Actor curse thing. Let's wrap up this conversation here. We've been talking a lot about bad biopics, ones that we don't necessarily like or approve of. Let's just end with some good ones here. I know I kind of sprung this one on you, Wes, so we'll save you for last, unless you thought of one while we were in this.
I definitely need some more time.
All right. Ryan, kick us off here. What is a biopic you would recommend?
I'm kind of going with the no-brainer, Oppenheimer. I absolutely loved this film. It was fantastic. Obviously, there's a few things that I kind of off about, but overall I absolutely loved this film. The cinematography is great. How they portray Oppenheimer, how they portray some of the other individuals, I thought was just great. Great acting. I was one of those weird guys that went and saw it in the 70mm IMAX, so it was just a wonderful experience.
One that I'm going to talk about here, I guess I wouldn't argue is the best, but there was sort of a trend there for a few years that I do wish, if biopics are going to keep doing this, sort of maybe rewriting people's stories, I do wish they would do more of this. I'm talking about I, Tonya. Now, in I, Tonya, there are a few moments where the character actually does a fourth wall break and goes, okay, this didn't actually happen this way. And this kind of got started with The Big Short, which I was going to mention here, but I also define a biopic as focusing on one person. The Big Short was kind of a group of separate people all over the place. But that was something very similar that they did there, that is also in I, Tonya, where they would address the camera at the very least. And they would at least admit to it, like saying, okay, this isn't actually how it happened. Or if it was something really crazy, they would turn to the camera and be like, yeah, that actually happened. Like, one of my favorite moments in The Big Short is when, like, Steve Carell's character, like, raises his hand a couple times, interrupts the thing, takes a call, and, like, walks out, and then it, like, focuses on Ryan Gosling. He's like, he actually did that. Asked two questions, rudely interrupted, took the call, left. Now you have to see what I have to deal with.
Yeah.
But, like, I, Tonya is another one here where it was kind of like, it would look at the camera and like, okay, it didn't exactly happen like this. If biopics are going to continue down this trend of rewriting people's stories, I'd much rather they admit to it, at least, and be open and transparent about it at the very least. So that's one that I'm going to recommend here to check out. Wes, have you thought of one?
Well, actually, I did. And actually, now because of your conversation, I actually have two, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
First one, specifically because of Nick's conversation he just had, Goodfellas. I really, I mean, I don't think there's too many people who haven't seen Goodfellas.
Yeah, by this time, everybody should have seen that.
But it's a wonderful movie to go back and rewatch. I mean, and it is one of those movies he does break the fourth wall and talk directly to camera too. But it's a lot of times to say, yeah, this is something. What I can't think of the guy's actual name. But that's something that they actually did while he was in the mafia.
Are you talking about Henry? Or Henry, is it Henry Hill? Now I'm blanking on it too. I don't know.
But they changed his name for the movie.
I've seen this. I've seen this movie how many times? I can't think of it either.
But so there's that one, and then the other one that not as many people might have seen, and this one might be a little bit of a controversial pick here: The Death of Stalin.
I know you've talked to me about this one. I still need to see it.
it's a comedy. And it's comedic.
Yes,
He's
know
going to recommend a movie that has death in the title.
Yes.
Like, it's
I know
funny.
the film.
Well, it's Joseph Stalin dying.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a scene in the movie where Joseph, the man playing Joseph Stalin, turns on a recording, listens to some music in his office, bedroom thing, whatever, and has a heart attack, passes out on the floor in a puddle of his own piss, and there's 2 guards standing outside that hear the commotion, and they're so terrified that if they interrupt him, they'll be executed, that they don't do anything all night long. And you think it's super ridiculous that wouldn't actually happen. That's how it happened in real life. That's how Joseph Stalin actually died.
Right.
And that's why I really, really like this movie, is because it takes the absurdity of Stalin's death and the absurdity of the power vacuum and the clamoring for his position after he died, and it puts it all out for everybody to see. It's made by the same guys that made the show Veep.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very much in keeping with that style.
Yeah, I remember
They know how to do
seeing-
political comedy over there.
Yeah, I remember seeing trailers for that. That's some pretty big name actors in it
Steve
too.
Buscemi plays Nikita Khrushchev. So, I mean, that's all you need to know, I guess.
Like, I remember watching that, and that is on my list. I haven't
Yeah.
seen it. I don't know where to watch it. I'm sure I'll find somewhere. But I remember it was like, I want to see that. That looks good.
Yeah, I strongly suggest it. It's a biopic and a comedy mixed together. And that's how I think you do a biopic, right, if you want it to be also entertaining.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's move on here quickly through the weekly preview. Not a lot to talk about here, so we'll just kind of move through this one a little bit quicker here. I know we've seen the trailers. Unfortunately, you probably haven't seen a lot of these trailers here, I'm assuming. So just kind of give an outside perspective here. I'm really bad at that. I'll send people to the first half of the outline. This is what we're going to talk about. And then I'll be like, oh, yeah, there's trailers you need to watch too.
Yeah.
I do this a lot.
For those of you watching or listening at home, I had no idea about any of this stuff we were going to talk about today.
We almost weren't able to do it because
Yeah.
a few minutes before you were going to leave, you called me and you're like, yeah, I might not make it because the car won't start right now.
So that was
So we were
wonderful.
this close to
Yeah.
not having it done here today.
Yeah.
So I'm thankful we're all here. Friday, December 8th, that's the weekend we're talking about here. Let's talk about what's coming out. The Boy and the Heron. This is an anime. Made by anime master Hayao Miyazaki. Hopefully I pronounced that right. I do apologize. I've said before, I'm not good at pronunciations on this show. It's a story about a boy who ventures into a world occupied by the living and the dead in an attempt to save his mother. When they made the English dub for this movie, which is going to be released in these U.S. theaters, it features quite the voice cast here.
Very good
Christian
voice
Bale, Dave Bautista, Gemma Chan, William Dafoe. I know you're a big fan of the Dafoe.
Willem
Willem Dafoe. Sorry, I told you I'm not good at pronunciations. Look, it's not like I'm trying to fake it and everything. I'm admitting to it. Also, Robert Pattinson and Florence Pugh in this as well. Oh, and Mark Hamill. I forgot to mention Mark Hamill.
I'm very excited about this.
This actually looks pretty good. Actually, the animation looks fantastic. The story looks a little bit out there, but at the core, it does seem kind of inspiring. Here.
So have you never seen a Studio Ghibli film?
I maybe have, but I can't think of one.
That's like my friend Totoro.
Yep, my friend Totoro, or
Maybe I'm thinking of a different studio because I don't think I've seen any of these.
Princess Mononoke, or there's a whole bunch of them, and all of them are considered to be classic animation films. I mean, they're films that if you go to a prestigious school to study not just animation but filmmaking in general, they would be on just about any course. And I am super excited for this movie. My fiance and I are super big into these movies, and this is the last one from this director. I'm going to try to make you to say his name again.
Hayao Miyazaki.
Hayao Miyazaki. He
I was pretty close.
pretty close. Yeah.
I'll take it. I'm going to take that as a win. That is a point for Nick.
But you know what? Now that I said it, I'm sure there's going to be someone out there. No, it's pronounced
pronounced
differently.
this,
Yeah.
something
But
like that.
no, I am super excited.
But yeah, you mentioned it's been a while. I think I read this is the first one he's done in like either 13 years or like since 2013.
Yeah.
13 had to be something to do with it, but yeah, gonna be a good one.
And Christian Bale's super excited to be in it because he loves Studio Ghibli movies, and he literally begged Studio Ghibli to do a voiceover,
an English dub.
a dub for one of their movies. He was like, I don't care. You can give me one line. I just want to be a part of this because
that's
they're
high
that
praise.
good.
If you got Bale coming to beg you to be in your movie,
And they went with it, and they made him the main voice for
because of course you do.
Oh God, what was it? Howl's Moving Castle. He played Howl in that movie. That's a really good one too.
Also coming out this weekend here, Leave the World Behind. This one's coming straight to Netflix. Julia Roberts, Ethan Hawke star, and this cute family little vacation that they take out to the beach. They rent a house and everything like that, but it starts to take a dark turn. First, it turns out the place they are renting belongs to another couple played by Mahershala Ali and Mahala. Oh my gosh, there's some tough names this week. Oh my God. Look it up, people. Okay. Yeah, so it's basically their house. They were essentially renting it as like an Airbnb. There we go.
Yep.
It's late here tonight, people. It's been a long day. Anyways,
Excuses,
long story
excuses.
Legitimate excuses. All right. Anyways, I lost my train of thought. Anyways, they're renting the house. Mahershala Ali owns the house, comes back because their plans change. These are details that could be confirmed if the internet was working. However, it seems like the internet is down, TV signals are not working, and it's revealed that a series of cyber attacks may be plunging the world into chaos. This movie really intrigues me because I feel like out of all the apocalypses or whatever like that, cyber attack actually seems like the most plausible and damaging one here in this day and age, if I'm going to be completely honest. Like, zombie apocalypses don't scare me. Let's be honest.
We live in Minnesota.
We live in we're distanced from
fine.
everyone. Everyone has got a gun, not only a gun but multiple guns. Like,
All you
zombie
gotta do-
wouldn't be really scary, to be honest.
All you got to do is get to wintertime, and they're going to all freeze.
Like, it's just a run out the clock situation.
Yeah.
It would be maybe a couple months, and we'd be fine.
We'd be fine.
Yeah.
Cyber attack actually though could do some damage. I feel like.
Yeah, and this kind of gave me Knock at the Cabin Door vibes a little bit.
I'm glad you brought that up because it did to me as well.
But its own take on something kind of similar, but not really a little bit. If that makes sense. But the whole you're at a place, some people come, now you're all in this one room together, or this one house together. Craziness is going on around you, but you don't know what it is.
You don't know what's fact, what's fiction. Is one maybe setting up the other? Who do you trust? All that sort of stuff. It is a very contained movie for it to be kind of a world-ending potential thing, which I do think is kind of interesting because, like you mentioned, it's very similar to Knock at the Cabin, where essentially the world was potentially ending around them, but again, they didn't know who to trust. They didn't know if they were telling the truth, but it was all taking place in this one location. So I think this one could be a pretty good one as well. But other streaming services have got their own here as well. It is the holiday season, so a little bit more holiday vibes going to be coming down the pipe here.
We're going through the Hallmark Channel now.
No. We're not going to talk about the Hallmark Channel. No. We're not that desperate. On Amazon Prime, premiering this weekend, Merry Little Batman. When Batman is called to the Justice League around Christmas time, it is up to his son Damian to save Gotham from the Joker and other villains. The Joker, who's basically doing the plot from The Grinch Stole Christmas, where he's just stealing all the Christmas presents and everything like that. It's an interesting animation. I was trying to think of what it reminded me of. I feel like it was like some Cartoon Network show or something like that. It's a 2D animation, but it's not like traditional 2D, but I feel like I've seen it before. I just couldn't quite place it. But it's very much spoof of Batman. Like, they make fun of Damian goes down into the Batcave and he sees all the suits, and there's the one with like super pointed nipples and the 8-pack or whatever that's clearly from Batman and Robin. He's like, and he like goes up to it and he goes, well, that just leaves nothing to the imagination. And it's very much like a kid-friendly Batman story because it's Damian, but it's not the Damian we're used to in the comics.
Yeah, Damian's not kid-friendly in the comics.
Because Damian Wayne is a jerk.
Yeah.
He is a spoiled jerk in the comics, and I hate him. But here he's just a kid. He's just a kid trying to be Batman.
I haven't seen this, but the only thing I wanted to say to that is, can I just say, not only are we tired of the spoof of superhero movies, but we're just tired of superhero movies in general. Am I completely off on that?
No, I will say, the traditional superhero films, TV shows, yes. Shows, I would say more like Invincible and The Boys, all in.
Yeah.
But
I would say those started as almost spoof of superhero shows, but have kind of built themselves as their own kind of thing here, essentially. Which, speaking of which, we got to check out the trailer for the new Boys season.
Well, and I was going to say,
is that
I think it came out either today or yesterday.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure The Boys that was a same thing. That was a comic book before it was a show. So yeah, but obviously it's for a comic book superhero, it is anti-superhero comic kind of. So, but yeah, I definitely need to watch that trailer.
And finally, the Sacrifice Game coming to Shudder. Ryan, you're kind of our Shudder expert here. You're our horror movie kind of guy.
And actually, now that you say that, I typed it in what's it about?
It's called the Sacrifice Game. I'm just gonna read off the IMDb here.
It's like Squid Games.
No, well, maybe. Maybe. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure I typed it in to watch the trailer, but I never watched it because then I went to go get the headset.
Oh, okay.
Actually, it just sounds like the new Hunger Games movie.
I'll tell you what. You two give me your predictions of what the Sacrifice Game is, and then I'm gonna read the IMDb. Let's make this a whole game here.
Okay.
There's no points or any prize, just bragging rights, and then we'll see who gets the closest here. Because I'm starting to think none of us have watched this trailer. Because I think I forgot to as well.
Yeah, I don't think I watched this one.
Sacrifice.
We somehow missed this. Ryan, go first.
All right. Sacrifice Game is a 2023 film based on a group of individuals who are trying to summon some evil spirit, and the only way to do that is by winning the sacrifice game. And you have to sacrifice enough body parts to make a complete human, but nobody can die except for the person that loses their head.
So like a more messed up Saw movie.
Yes.
A more messed up Saw movie. Never thought I'd hear that before. All right, Wes. What's your prediction?
A complete shot-for-shot remake of Sophie's Choice.
That's a sacrifice.
Okay, here is the IMDb summary listed here. It's bad enough that boarding school students Samantha and Clara can't go home for the holidays, but things take a deadly turn when a murderous gang arrives on their doorstep just in time for Christmas. Yeah, not a lot to go off of.
I didn't watch that.
I'd honestly rather watch either of your two movies, to be completely honest.
It's a Die Hard.
It's not a Die Hard.
It's a Christmas movie. It's about you said murderous robbers,
murderous gang,
so I think they breaking into and they got to fight. It's a Die Hard, they got to fight off.
Well, because I don't know, they are drawing stuff on like the windows here and stuff. Maybe it is sort of like a sacrificial ritual. Anyways, it's creepy. It's around Christmas. The trend of holiday movies turning creepy continues here, and
they're making money, baby. They're making money.
It's been working for the most part. Like it's been working.
Did it start with Krampus? Is that kind of what started it?
I would say that was one of the first big ones.
Yeah,
I would say, or at the very least, I think that one kind of became one of those sleeper hits where like it kind of grew on DVD a little bit more, and then it kind of started the trend up a little bit more as well. But yeah, I'd say that was a big first one here. But
I would say one of the bigger ones.
But with that, let's wrap things up here. A little bit longer episode here today. Let's finalize things with another edition of Number One Recommends. This is where we talk about a movie, TV show, book, video game, whatever it is that we experienced this past week that we recommend other people check out. Wes, would you like to kick us off here? Is there a movie, TV show, any sort of piece of entertainment this past week that you've watched or experienced that you want to recommend to the masses?
It's a little bit later, but I finally got around to watching the final for Star Trek Lower Decks. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it or heard of it. Lower Decks, it's
That's
the
the
animated
one. Yes,
comedic
yeah.
with and it was everything I was hoping for the season finale. It moved characters forward. It set up new storylines. It's very beautiful animation. I suggest that.
Ryan, what do you got?
I'm going with the holiday classic, Thanksgiving.
You can't call it a classic if it's only been out for a few weeks.
It's a classic. It's
It doesn't
classic.
count. That doesn't count.
I learned of the backstory
God.
like a week before I went to it that this was a motion picture in the Grindhouse double feature that came out. Grindhouse that came out like 10 or 15 years ago or whatever. And then Eli Roth finally made it into production. It's great satire on holiday or the I would say the Black Friday consumerism and a little bit to do with Thanksgiving. More of the whole like what gets it started is the Black Friday interfering with Thanksgiving. And if you're a fan of Tim Dillon, he's in there for a couple of minutes. Gold. The opening sequence, gold.
Oh gosh.
I'm going to recommend Please Don't Destroy the Treasure of Foggy Mountain. These are from the guys that create the Please Don't Destroy shorts on SNL. If you haven't checked them out, I would suggest watching a few of their sketches on YouTube before you watch this movie. That will determine whether or not you're going to like the humor in this. A lot of the same humor that is in those sketches is in here as well. I laughed a lot. I thought I just love everything these guys do, to be completely honest. I'm always looking forward to the next SNL for their next little short film, and I'm glad they were able to kind of juggle the bigger task of taking on a feature film here as well. So,
Isn't Conan randomly in that movie?
not randomly, he's a character in it for quite a few minutes. He plays
I've just
plays
seen
one
the
of their
trailer.
dads. He plays one of the dads in there. It's actually got quite a few interesting cameos as well.
Gosh.
So go ahead and check that one out. Well, that's going to do it for us here on this episode of Popcorn Bucket List. Head on over to the Marshall 6 Theater to check out some of the movies we talked about on this episode and past ones. And if you're in the Iona, Minnesota area, say hi to our buddy Wes over there. Why don't you tell him where are you working right now over at the bar over in Iona?
I'm working in Iona. It's called Town Bar and Grill. Come check us out.
Yep, good place to head out over there. For myself, Mr. Beeren, and Mr. Meyerberg, we'd like to thank you so much for watching, and we will see you at the movies.